When a veteran learned the value of his old Rolex, his reaction left Antiques Roadshow fans floored. The traveling TV series Antiques Roadshow is known for shining a spotlight on priceless collectibles. However, it's not often the item's owners have a physical reaction to finding out the value of their possessions. So, when an Air Force veteran discovered the true worth of his incredibly unique Rolex, his remarkable response stunned the show's producers and fans alike. The veteran, who is referred to on the show as David, was drafted during the Vietnam War. At the time, all young men aged 18 to 25 were assigned a number for each draft lottery. When a number was pulled, anyone with that number or less, and who was eligible for serving in the military, was called up to serve. When David's number was pulled, then he was told he would have to join a branch of the military. Otherwise, he would be automatically enlisted by the following January. The veteran consequently decided to join the U.S. Air Force, where he began serving in munitions. More specifically, he was dealing with explosive ordnance disposal. From 1973, David spent 2 years stationed in Thailand, and during that stint, he flew on a number of Continental Airlines. It was on these flights that he first developed a fondness for Rolex. Indeed, he noticed that pilots would frequently wear the brand's watches, finding himself intrigued by the timepieces. David decided he wanted to buy a Rolex watch for himself, but quickly discovered they were beyond his budget. For a while, then, he put the idea on the back burner. But eventually he was moved on to another base, where he spent time scuba diving. And with Rolex's reputation as a great choice for scuba divers, it's no surprise the activity brought the watch brand back to the forefront of his mind. In the end, David managed to find a Rolex for what he considered to be a reasonable price, $345.97, with a 10% discount. Nevertheless, it was still an expensive purchase, supposedly amounting to around a month's military salary in the 1970s. The veteran ordered the watch through the One-Base department store in November 1974. It finally arrived in April the following year. The particular variant David ended up purchasing was a Rolex Oyster Cosmograph. However, according to the veteran's own account, he never actually used the timepiece. When it arrived, he realized it was too nice to wear whilst scuba diving. So, he simply placed it into a safety deposit box, where it remained for another 3 or 4 decades. In fact, the watch supposedly only left its secure housing on 2 or 3 occasions all that time, and when it did, it was only for David to look at it, before it went back into storage. As a result, the timepiece was in fantastic condition, particularly given its age. What's more, David also kept all the original documentation he had received when buying it. It's therefore completely understandable that David was so interested in getting a valuation for the Rolex. And to do so, he decided to speak to the expert appraisers of Antiques Roadshow. The hit series has been running for more than 2 decades in the US and features individuals looking to get a price for their possessions. The appraisal of David's Rolex has since been uploaded to Antiques Roadshow's YouTube channel, where it's had more than 7.5 million views. In the clip, appraiser Peter Plains quizzes David on his own backstory and how he came to acquire the watch. He then asks the veteran about what's happened to the timepiece in the years since. With all that information in mind, Plains subsequently draws on his own knowledge of rare watches to offer an assessment. He begins by looking over all the paperwork David has kept with the watch, including the brochure, receipts, and even the original warranty paper. Because this letter sheet is blank and can therefore add value to any watch, Plains estimates that it alone is worth around $2,000. The appraiser then focuses on the watch itself, highlighting all the relevant details that will help him ascertain its price. First, he points out that the watch isn't just a regular Rolex cosmograph. In fact, it's an oyster variant, which refers to the screw-down buttons on the side of the watch's body. According to Plains, this particular Rolex was produced in two styles, both with and without screw-down buttons. It's the latter features that make the watch so popular, however, because they allow it to be submerged in water. And back when the timepiece was first released, that was a great incentive for buyers from all over the globe. Plains also addresses the condition of the watch, noting that it's been very well looked after over the years. Indeed, the foil sticker on the watch's back is still present, indicating a reference number of 6263. Had it been worn, that's the first thing that would wear off the watch, the appraiser explains. He then points to the date mark, which shows that the watch was produced in 1971. As the clip continues, Plains tells David that models of the watch new men wore usually fetch around $150,000 to $200,000 at auction. And despite being quoted such an enormous sum of money, the veteran remains surprisingly calm. However, what the appraiser says next inspires an entirely different reaction from David. Plains explains that David's watch is even more special than the model new men wore, because it's an oyster variant. They did that for an extremely short period of time, the appraiser says. We refer to that as a Mark II dial, and this particular model, being marked oyster, is extremely rare. A watch like this at auction is worth about $400,000. At that moment, upon hearing this even larger figure, David collapses to the floor in shock. In fact, he goes down with such force that his legs fly into the air. Plains then rushes across the table to check that the veteran is okay, while voices off camera can be heard laughing at his reaction. Thankfully, David is absolutely fine, and the sprightly fellow quickly hops back up again, laughing in disbelief at the news he has just been given. But Plains then tells him, "Don't fall, I'm not done yet." Yes, it turns out the appraiser chose his words carefully when he said, "A watch like David's sells for $400,000. That's because, largely thanks to the condition David's watch is in, it isn't actually worth that eye-watering amount. It's a new old stock watch, with no wear on it, the original foil sticker on the back of it, and we have this complete documentation," Plains says. It's maybe one of the very few in the whole world that was still never worn. The appraiser then reveals that in light of all that, David's watch would actually fetch around $500,000 to $700,000 at auction. This time, David manages to stay on his feet. However, it's clear that he is absolutely blown away by the figure Plains has just uttered. Indeed, he shakes his head in continued disbelief and makes a remark that has to be bleeped out by the show's producers. Nevertheless, Plains responds that he is very serious about his appraisal. It's an absolutely fabulous find, Plains confirms. It's one of the rarest Paul Newman models, and in this condition I don't think there is a better one in the world. I can't thank you enough for bringing me one of the greatest watches to ever be seen on Antiques Roadshow, and thank you very much for your service. The appraiser then warns David that he can't wear his magnificent antique. If he does, the value will drop to around $400,000. However, it's not known what the veteran's plans are for his staggeringly valuable collectible. He has saved it all these years, Plains told the Washington Post in January 2020. He may be saving it more. According to Plains, David's reaction stands out as particularly memorable. That's perhaps not too surprising, though, given that his Rolex is the most valuable ever to appear on the show. It's not, however, the most valuable watch ever featured. Indeed, that honor apparently belongs to another timepiece, which is now said to be worth $2 million to $3 million. The Antiques Roadshow clip has garnered millions of views and thousands of comments since it was uploaded to YouTube, and much of the online reaction to the astonishing appraisal has been roundly positive. For instance, one YouTube user wrote, "Somebody's retirement just became a lot more comfortable. Congrats to this gentleman." Another, meanwhile, was similarly effusive in his praise for David and the show. The man spent his time in service defusing mines and unexploded ordnance. They wrote, "I could not think of a more deserving person to have this sort of discovery. Hats off. Happy for you and everyone you have had a positive effect on." However, not all online reaction has been positive. In fact, some users have even criticized Plain's appraisal of the watch. "The watch has obviously been worn," wrote one. "There are many scuffs on the band and a light scratch on the front. How is it being called never worn new old stock?" And it didn't take long for other users to jump in and voice their agreement. Another person wrote, "The sticker and clasp shows at least a year of frequent wear, so you can't call it new old stock nowhere like this appraiser does. Those stickers don't get like that from sitting in a lockbox." Meanwhile, another user agreed that the segment was total amateur hour by the appraiser. Nevertheless, an expert named Paul Botros backed up Plain's valuation to Forbes in February 2020. "The watch appears exceptionally well preserved and complete, and I'm in agreement with the appraisal," he said. "It's a watch that Phillips would be thrilled to offer at auction." Indeed, a similar watch apparently sold for $425,000 at auction in December 2019. So, when worn watches can fetch north of $400,000, though it's no wonder David reacted the way he did to Plain's appraisal. After all, he paid just $345.97 for the watch all those decades ago. As investments go, then it's performed pretty spectacularly. And, of course, it's made for a real moment to remember for Antiques Roadshow fans.